All right, so today we're going to continue in this series called Hostage, and that feeling that the guy in this beginning of the video was talking about is anger. You see, the anger kind of builds in us, and we have to figure out what to do with it. And that anger can lead us into other areas in which will give us that kind of explosive kind of behavior. And so when we're looking at anger today, what are you angry about? Anybody want to throw out some suggestions, like possible ideas on what we might be angry about? Right, so things that are happening in our country. The delay on taxes? Getting your refund? Oh, because they cut 30,000? Yeah, that would be a reason why during tax season, right? Cutting that off, right? So there's things, and then you start to be able to break those things down because these are like really big issues, right? These are like widespread things that are happening in our country. Then you also look at the world, like these are huge, and we can get angry about things that are happening. But then you start to break it down a little bit, and you'd say, well, I'm kind of angry at a relationship. I'm angry at a coworker. I'm angry at a friend. I'm angry whatever, right? So then you start breaking those things down. You're angry because of situations you find yourself in. And here's the thing is that the list of angry is really long, and we probably don't even have enough time to be able to go through all the ways in which we're angry. You see, anger somehow is a part of our life in many different ways, and we're going to look at a couple of ways that it probably manifests itself as well. But we'll start here at Ephesians 4:26. This is what Paul says to start us off today. Paul says, and don't let sin by letting anger control you. Don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you are still angry. Now here's the preface for this, right? Ephesians, Paul is writing from prison. He's writing from prison that he has been put there because of him, not because he created some like malicious crimes throughout his journey, but because he was preaching Christ. And they said, hey, can you stop doing that? And he's like, no, I can't. And so then he continues to do it, and they're like, okay, so this is what's going to happen. We're going to throw you in jail, and you're going to be there for a little while until you learn your lesson. And he's like, well, I'm not going to learn my lesson. I'm going to still continue to preach Christ. Right? So there's plenty of reasons why Paul probably is angry, or we could justify and say, well, I think he's probably angry. You see, angry is that emotional response to being hurt. Now that is, again, why, right? Because we can get hurt in lots of different ways, but it's a response within us. Because sometimes it's not even somebody hurts me, but there's somebody who's hurting somebody I love, and so therefore I'm still angry. There's a response to something. But this is where, and I'm going to mention this twice today because I want you to understand this, anger is not sin. Anger is not sin. You can be angry without sinning. And we're going to talk about a little bit about this. We'll close with the last kind of what we would call righteous anger. And we're going to close with that, but I want to be able to have you understand that it's really hard for us to sometimes hold righteous anger and still yet can be without sin in that anger. So, when we're looking at this, angry, you can be angry. Angry is an emotional response. We can look at it, we can understand it, we can say, I am angry, and still it not being sinful. So, we continue. Verse 27. Paul says, for anger gives a foothold to the devil. And this is where it's saying, so anger, I can hold it and I can be angry, but if I continue to hold it, there's also a foothold that evil is trying to be able to creep into my life, trying to get me to take this anger out on somebody else, which then leads to the sin. Unresolved anger can be used as a foothold for so much. And when we become angry, then it starts to destroy us on the inside because it turns to bitterness, which we already talked about as a hostage. Bitterness was there, right? And bitterness is there because of fear, because of anger. And when we hold it in and we continue to kind of compound it, anger then is like we don't know what to do with it. And so we look back, and this is a continuation from last week. I brought to you that story with Cain and Abel in Genesis, all the way back in the beginning. And you see, God is trying to be able to speak some truth to Cain and Abel, right? Because there's some stuff that God already sees in advance. So if we go back to Genesis real quick, Genesis chapter 4, we see this whole Cain and Abel story. And God is coming to Cain and he says, "Why are you so angry? Why do you look so dejected?" And why is Cain so angry? Cain is like, I've got a hard job. I have to do this whole land thing, and I've got to plant seeds, and I've got to wait for them to grow. And God already said, because out of the fall, if you remember, it says it's going to be hard for the one who's toiling at the earth because the earth is not going to act like it once did. And so you're going to have to put a whole lot more energy, pain into this whole soil and farming system. Cain's like, this isn't really fair. He's like, Abel's got the job of hunting, right? He goes out there and brings in, some wildlife. Sometimes he's there raising the goats and the cattle and the whatever it is. He's like, he got an easy job. Why can't I have an easy job? And he gets angry. And that anger builds. God sees it in Cain and he says, "Why are you so angry? I can see it in you. You feel dejected." You see, there's the part when anger is starting to come to that point in us that all of a sudden other people are like, "Why are you so angry?" They can see it in you because it's starting to go out of you. You see, the foothold that it's taken in your life is that's what Paul was saying in Ephesians. He's saying when this anger builds up in you, when it's there, it starts to be able to manifest itself outside of you. You look dejected. There's something about you that anger is taking hold. And what happens? What happens when Cain then all of a sudden has an opportunity when his brother comes and gives this gift to the Lord, and the Lord's like, "I love this gift. This is an awesome gift." And then Cain comes and he's like, I got this, I got a bushel for you. It was something left over. And God's like, "I don't really like that gift because you're giving it to me half-hearted. You don't care about your gift to me." And then Cain's like, "Wait a second, this isn't fair." And the anger continues to build. And he sees his brother in the field. "I don't see anybody around. I don't think I'm going to get in trouble for this." He takes a rock, crushes his brother's skull. You see what anger did here? It was building and building and building. Bad stuff happens. So how do we master anger? And that's what we've been talking about, is any of these hostages that we've been talking about, we say, how can we master it? How can we put it in its place? Well, here's a few things that we're going to talk about first before we even get to the mastering part, because here's the two big ways that people take anger and they do bad stuff with it. These are things that we don't want to do. So we got two things. You can see them on the screen. We got spewers and we've got stewers. And you're already thinking, I already know which one I am. And you probably do know which one you are. Because usually what we have, the first one is the spewers. And this is what it does. They are feeling angry and they don't hide a bit of it. They're like, I need to get this out. And they take their anger out. They're the, let me talk to your manager spewer. They are the one that says, I'm not going to keep this anger inside. I'm going to continue to show it to the person or the people or the groups that I'm angry with. They spew it out. So let's go real quick. Proverbs chapter 29. This is where God talks, through Solomon. And Solomon writes this down, Proverbs chapter 29, verse 11. This is what it says about these people. It says, fools vent their anger, but the wise quietly hold it back. So we get a spewer, right? And the spewer's like, and this can be, and this is why we're going to look at both of these, why these are, neither one of them are good. Because when you're looking at it, you're like, oh, but the stewer, they keep it in. They don't lash out. They don't yell. They don't do the things that cause like all the commotion. So it can't be that bad. But here's the thing, the spewers, it says, is the fools are going to act like this. They're going to take their anger that was boiling up and they said, I don't want it. I'm going to spew it out at other people because then it makes me feel better. I'm not going to ask you which one you are, but the spewers you can kind of see. They're not afraid to be able to take their anger that's in them and to cast it out at people. And then you get the stewers. And the stew is this, right? It continues. You put everything in the pot, and then you put a lid on it. And the stewer's like, things are happening, and you got that anger, and you're like, no, I'm going to keep this contained. I got to keep it contained. I can't make sure to let anybody know that I'm angry. And so what do? We just keep it in the pot. We put our lid on it. But you see, the heat's on. The heat's going on your pot, and you're trying to keep all your anger contained because you want to make sure that people don't look at you like you are an angry person, and so you keep it down, and you keep it in the pot. You got your lid on it. You think everything is secure. You think everything is fine. Everything is going to be fine. And it all of a sudden is like, and that anger explodes like boiling water out on everybody. You see, sometimes the stewards can be a little bit worse because when the thing explodes, it can be upon people that had no part of your anger. They weren't the thing that was making you angry, and yet somehow the stewer, when it just explodes, it explodes on everybody. Let's look at Psalm 32. This is what it says in verse 3. When I refused to confess my sin, my body wasted away, and I groaned all day long. All right, you see, the stewer themselves, they continue to keep it. Like, I'm going to take my anger, and I'm going to try to absorb my anger. And I feel like, hey, I can do this. I can take these little parts of anger and I'm going to try to absorb it. I'm going to try to push it down. I'm going to try to act like it's not there. I'm not going to talk about it. But it becomes that boiling anger. See, these are two ways that anger finds itself in us that are not good. Spewers and stewers, they both find their way out of being able to say this anger is going to come out at some point in time and it's going to get on somebody else and it's going to cause us to not just have anger within us, but also using that anger as a foothold for evil to be able to be leached out everywhere around us. I take you to Luke 15. This is it's a story that I go to quite a bit. This is known as the prodigal son. But all of Luke 15, it's a great passage and a great parts of Scripture that start with some of these parables that Jesus is trying to be able to point out to both the Pharisees and the other collected sinners, right? There's the known sinners like the prostitutes, the thieves, the tax collectors. They're all in that kind of sinner category. And then you also get this other kind of collective audience, which is the Pharisees, the teachers of the law. And here Jesus is addressing both. And so when he's using these parables, there's always two sides to it. He's trying to be able to point it at one audience and then also at the other audience. He's trying to be able to do this wonderful teaching style. But when you get to the prodigal son story, which we think is always about this reckless kid who wants his dad dead, and he asks for his inheritance even before his dad is dead, right? And he's like, God, give me my money. I'm out of here. And he goes out on this wild, reckless living, throws a whole bunch of parties. He's like, this is the good life, until he runs out of money. And he runs out of all the friends who he thought were friends, but they were just there to be able to party with him. And he's like, I got nothing left. I'm going to have to go and work as a pig farmer. And then he longs for the things that the pigs are eating. And he goes back to his father, and his father is there with open arms, and he brings him in. You see, the prodigal son story it always tends to be looking at this reckless kid, but you see the prodigal, the one that's actually the one that never comes back to the father, is the one who stayed. Let's look at the end real quick. Luke chapter 15, verse 28. The older brother was angry, and he refused to go in to the party that the father was throwing for the son who was once lost and is now found. His father came out and begged him. But he replied, all these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to. And all that time you never gave me even a young goat for a feast with my friends. You see, this older brother has this thing in him that he's like, I've been doing, working for you, Dad. While this younger brother of mine, he left, he took his inheritance, he wasted it, and now he's come back and you're going to just bring him in like nothing happened? Not fair. Do you see the anger that was building up in him? That same kind of idea of fairness? Same thing, Cain and Abel. Cain's like, this isn't fair. I deserve better than this. The older brother, this isn't fair. He went and spent all of his stuff. I never even asked for any of this. I never asked you for a goat. I never asked you to have a party. And the father tells him, everything I had was always yours. And he refuses to go in because he preferred to keep his anger instead of going into the feast. You see this thing that's happening, this anger that is building in people, and this is a story, these are parables that Jesus is telling about the eternal feast. He's saying God's going to rejoice when the lost is found. And yet some people will say, no, you don't have a part in this. This is mine. And God brings in the unlikely. God brings in those that were on the margins. God brings in those that we're looking at and saying, oh, they don't have a place here. They shouldn't have a place here. And God's like, nope, they do have a place here. The lost are now found. Let's all celebrate. And somebody says, nope, I'm not going to celebrate with you. I don't like you. You're evil. You're wicked. I refuse to be in the same place as you. You see what anger is doing? So as we said, not all sin is anger. Not all anger is sin. There we go. Not all anger is sin. So how do we master this sinful kind, right? Because this is the part when we're dealing with Cain, when we're dealing with the older brother, the lost brother, right? The one who refuses to go into the eternal kingdom, right? The one who's saying, I'd prefer to be on the outside. How do we master this kind of anger that's trying to have a foothold in our life so that it leads us to greater amounts of sin as we take it out on people? That's the question. So we're going to go back to Proverbs. Proverbs has some good words, pithy sayings for us to be able to go back to. So Proverbs chapter 17, verse 14. Starting a quarrel is like opening a floodgate. So stop before a dispute breaks out. Right? So what is the proverb trying to be able to say? He's like, when you know this anger is a part of what's building up in you, it says, when you release it, when you take it out, it's going to lead to all kinds of quarrels. It's going to lead to all kinds of fighting. It's going to lead to hurt. It's going to lead to sin. So what does the proverbist say about this? He says, stop it. Stop it. Cut it out. You're like, oh, is it that easy? Stop it before a dispute breaks out. So when the anger is rising in you, it's good to acknowledge it. This is something that the counselor, right, he talked to me about. He says, anger is this. He says, anger is like, it's there, see it. Identify it. Don't say, anger, you're not allowed to be here because I think anger is bad, or at least I think somebody told me anger was bad, and so I can't feel it. I can't be angry at people. And that's just not that's not a thing. Anger can lead to something bigger, but instead, if we start to see it when it first happens, acknowledge it. Why am I angry? Why is that anger there? Who is my anger directed at? Envision it. Say, oh, I see you, anger, and I know the source of where my anger is. That's where I'm picturing in my head. I know where that anger is directed. I can see a person. Now, what is that anger? What could it do? And you can even play that out in your head. You can say, what is it that this anger would do? Left unchecked, I can see it in my head. And I know that's not going to be a good conclusion. All right. So what's a better conclusion? You see, when we acknowledge it, then we're not saying I have to try to be able to ignore it like the stewer, right? I don't have to just say, no, anger, you're not here because I can't be angry because it's going to lead me to sin. No, you acknowledge it. You say, it's here. What am I going to do with it? Because I don't want it to lead to a sinful output. So when we acknowledge it, then we put anger on notice, and we're like, anger, I know you're there. I know where my anger is directed at. Now what do I do with it? You say, instead of taking that step outward and causing this action to be able to hurt other people around us, then we'd say, you know what, this is the moment that I'm going to acknowledge it, I'm going to see it, I'm going to even play it out in my head, but I also know that I don't want it to go there. So then we say, God, I got this anger. I got the object of my anger. Help me to deal with it. I don't want to feel the anger, but sometimes we need it. Because when we feel it, then we know it's there. Then we can say, I have this feeling, and the feeling is okay. But anger is always going to be your choice. Anger is a choice. And so if it's a choice, then you're going to say, you know what? Then I need to be able to put this anger in its rightful spot. I have to have mastery over it. This is why it's still hard. This is why it still often leads us into those sinful places, because we can't be a master over it. Because we've dealt with anger in the wrong way before, and we feel like there's a place, I'm going to just keep going back to that spot because it felt good to be able to get the anger out, and it directed at people that needed to be directed at. But it's hard to be able to master it. It's easy to be able to say, we look at this verse and it just says, stop it before a dispute breaks out. This is the way we master it. This is the way that we can stop. We just say, you know what, I see it, I recognize it, and now I'm going to stop it before it goes into a dispute. So, there's anger. Now, what about this other side? We get righteous anger. And this is where we need to acknowledge, right? Anger is in us. And then we look at this and we'd say, how do we know if our anger is righteous or unrighteous? How do we know that this is an angry part that I think is good? And this is what we look at. We say, let's go back to God. What does God talk about? God talks about justice and injustice. And so if we're trying to be able to look at what is a righteous anger that God says, yes, you should hold this, it goes back to something that's going to anger the very heart of God. What angers the heart of God? And this is where the tricky part, and why we talk about righteous anger and we talk about unrighteous anger, and we see sometimes that the line gets a little bit bled over because we're trying to be able to say, well, what is righteous, what's unrighteous, and how do we try to be able to do this rightly? So we look at these issues that God talks about all over Scripture. What's the issue? Poverty. God talks about poverty, talks about the poor. We look at this and say, we know that poverty is causing all kinds of problems around the world. It causes people in poverty to be able to say, I need to do anything and everything in order to be able to get something I don't have. right? It's causing some people to sin, even if they're out of their poverty, they're trying to grab things that maybe aren't theirs. We look at disease. God doesn't like disease either. And disease is being spread all kinds of different places. And we look at this disease and we say, this is an issue that we should be angry about because some of these diseases shouldn't even exist. Some of these diseases we've already been a master over because somebody has studied it, looked at it, and says this is the way that we have defeated it. And yet somehow this disease comes back again and we're like, come on. Maybe it's politics. And we're looking at this and we're saying, has God been angry about politics? Absolutely, God's been angry about politics. Because politics has, and especially in its corrupted state, has continued to corrupt poverty and disease. And so when we look at this, we'd say, there's an angry part of us that's still saying we don't like corruption. And we can be angry about it because we also know that God's heart is angry after it. And what about the self-righteous people? God talks about not being for self-righteous people. Jesus is looking at especially in the Gospels. We talked about the prodigal son story, but all of Luke 15 when he's addressing these Pharisees and teachers of the law who are saying, I have a hold of my righteousness. I followed the laws. I've done what was necessary. And God's like, no. You can't save yourself. You think you could save yourself because what did that do? They looked at themselves and they said, I've held all the laws rightly and goodly and everything, right? I've done everything good. So now I get to look at other people and say, man, you guys are bad. If you were only like me, then this world would be so much better because we would all then follow the law. This is self-righteousness. Self-righteousness is poured out into people. So when God's looking at this and he speaks towards self-righteous people, he's saying you should be angry when somebody's self-righteous. So what do we do with this kind of anger? And this is the part when we have to say, this is something that you should, with fellow disciples and members of the body of Christ, be able to talk about this kind of righteous anger. Because you want to check it. Am I good and right being in this spot to be able to be angry about this? Is this something that you believe angers the very heart of God? And this, in discussion, you can be able to say, okay, maybe this has crossed into some unrighteous anger. But maybe through that deliberation, you're saying somebody's like, yeah, not only should you be angry about this, but now I'm angry with you. And this kind of righteous anger, he talks about fanning the flame of this righteous anger. Why? Because it says we can do something about this. What do we do when we're looking at these issues that anger us? Then we look at poverty and say, what's a way in which we can speak towards poverty that's happening right around us? What can we do about disease? What can we do about political corruption? What do we do about the self-righteous and all the other righteous things that God's heart is angry after? We fan it into flame. What can I do today to speak out about this? What can I do to not just be silent in this? Because here's the thing, what happens with that kind of anger, even that righteous anger that gets bottled up, still can lead us to boil over into sin. If we try to say, I'm going to do nothing and say nothing, and yet God's heart is angry about it, this is not good. This is where we'll end today, Mark chapter 3. This is Jesus. It's always good to leave on Jesus. Mark chapter 3, verse 5. Jesus was going in. It's the Sabbath. There's a guy who's there, and he's got a condition with his arm. Jesus is going to try to heal it, but the Pharisees are like, whoa, Jesus, don't you know the law? Right? Self-righteous people speaking to Jesus about what the law is. Jesus, you can't heal somebody on the Sabbath. That's against the law. It's against the rules. You can't do this. And Jesus looked around at them angrily. Right? This is how we know that in anger, there's still not sin. Because Jesus is holding anger. He looked around them with anger and was deeply saddened by their hard hearts. And then what does Jesus do? Then he said to the man, hold out your hand. So the man held out his hand, and it was restored. Jesus had anger, and he did something about it. We look at Jesus turning the tables over. There was anger. He did something about it. So when we come to this righteous side of the anger things, and we're saying, God, help me to be able to distinguish rightly what it is that's right and good, to be able to hold with anger, and what is the anger that's leading me towards sin. This is something to talk through. This is an ongoing battle that anger is trying to continue to hold you hostage in it. It's trying to be able to hold you back. It's trying to be able to say there's nothing that you can do about your anger. You're just going to be an angry person. And as an angry person, you're going to take it out on everybody around you. It wants you to believe that there is no route out. But don't let it be your hostage taker. Ask God for help in this. And say, anger, you have your place. Not here. In Jesus' name. Please stand and pray with me.